All right, let's get into it. Today, we are diving deep into the world of fertility treatments, and we're going to talk about a test that really promised to be a game changer, the Endometrial Receptivity Analysis, or you've probably heard of it as the ERA test.
You know, if you've ever been through IVF, a failed embryo transfer is it's devastating. And it almost always boils down to this one agonizing question: why? You've got a perfectly healthy embryo, everything seems to be going right, and then it just doesn't work. What on earth went wrong?
Well, for a while now, there's been this test that came along with a really compelling answer. It basically said, hey, maybe the problem isn't the embryo, and maybe it's not even the uterus, maybe it's something much, much simpler: timing. And this test promised to find that perfect moment for a successful transfer.
Okay, so to really get what this test is promising, we have to understand the biological puzzle it's trying to solve. And it all comes down to a concept called the window of implantation. So, get this, the lining of the uterus, the endometrium, it's not just open for business 24/7. Nope. There's a super short, very specific window of time, maybe just a couple of days, when it becomes the perfect biological docking station for an embryo. If you miss that window, implantation it can't happen. And right there, that's the entire theory behind the ERA test. See, standard IVF protocols, they time the transfer based on when the average person's window should be open. But the big what if here is, what if you're not average? What if your personal window of implantation opens a little bit earlier or maybe a little bit later than everyone else's?
And that's exactly where the ERA test comes into the picture. It offers this promise of a personalized transfer schedule, one that's supposed to be perfectly tailored to your unique biology.
So how does this thing actually work? Well, you go through what's called a mock transfer cycle. You take all the same hormones, but no embryo is actually transferred. Instead, at the time you would have had a transfer, your doctor takes a tiny little sample, a biopsy of your uterine lining. That sample gets sent off to a lab where they analyze the activity of hundreds of different genes to see if it's receptive. It's kind of like creating a molecular fingerprint to see if the welcome sign is on. And based on that, the lab gives a recommendation for the perfect timing for your real transfer.
And you'll get one of three results. Receptive means, hey, the standard timing is perfect for you. Pre-receptive means your window hasn't opened yet, so for the real deal, you'll need to transfer a bit later. And post-receptive means you missed it. The window already closed, so the next transfer needs to happen earlier. On paper, it sounds great, right? A clear, actionable plan.
So, we have this powerful promise and this really clear procedure. But does it actually help more people have a baby? This is where we need to take a hard look at the science.
The central claim, the whole reason the ERA test exists, has always been super simple and direct. If you use this test to guide your transfer timing, you will have a higher chance of a live birth than if you just stick with the standard protocol.
But then, in 2022, the biggest and most definitive study on this dropped. It was published in the Journal of the American Medical Association, a really big deal. They took almost 800 women and randomly put them into two groups. One got a standard transfer, the other got an ERA-guided transfer. And the result? It was completely unambiguous. As the study says, live birth rates were the same in both groups.
I mean, just look at the data. Whether a clinic used the standard timing or the so-called personalized timing from the ERA test, the outcome was pretty much identical. About 60% of people in both groups had a successful live birth. Statistically speaking, the test made zero difference.
Now, I know what you might be thinking. Okay, but what about the specific people this was designed for? The ones who've had multiple, unexplained failures? Well, even when scientists pooled all the data from multiple trials, there still hasn't been a single large, high-quality study that shows a clear benefit for these patients either.
So why? Why didn't this incredibly promising idea work out? Well, a few big reasons. The number one reason is that most of the time, implantation fails because of chromosomal issues within the embryo itself, and no amount of perfect timing can fix that. On top of that, some research suggests a person's window can actually move around from one cycle to the next, so a test result from 1 month might not even be accurate for the next. And of course, there's the fact that the test costs a lot and delays your actual treatment by at least a month.
So given all this new evidence, the official recommendations from the world's leading fertility organizations, well, they've become pretty darn clear. The big European society, ESHRE, flat out says these tests are not recommended for routine use, not even for patients with recurrent failures.
And here in the US, the American Society for Reproductive Medicine, ASRM, doesn't endorse it as a standard of care. They say doctors need to tell patients that a clear benefit just hasn't been proven.
So, okay, let's put all the pieces together. What should you, as a patient or an intended parent, really take away from all this?
First, let's talk about the practical side of things. In the United States, the ERA test is going to set you back somewhere between $1,000 and $1,500, and it's almost never covered by insurance. That's a serious chunk of change for a test that doesn't have proven benefits.
So when might you even talk about it? Well, you might discuss it with your doctor as a sort of let's try everything experimental option if you've really had multiple unexplained failures. But on the flip side, you probably don't need to even think about it if this is your first go, or if you already know why past transfers failed, like issues with embryo quality.
At the end of the day, the science is really pointing us in one direction. Focus on the things we know for sure make the biggest difference. That means making sure you have the highest quality embryo you can get, ensuring the uterus is healthy, and working with a clinic that provides excellent evidence-based medical care.
You know, the story of the ERA test really leaves us with a much bigger question. In a field like medicine that's so full of hope and amazing innovation, how do we, as patients, as doctors, tell the difference between a real breakthrough and just the buzz from a promising technology that isn't quite ready? It's a critical question and one we should all keep asking. Thanks for tuning in.